everyone, it's Shane Kanto, your Wasteland Reviewer. Welcome to the Wasteland, my weekly show where I take a deep dive into a particular film and all along the John Ford train for forever. And we're getting a bit of a comedy, a bit of a gangster movie. And joining me for this episode is my buddy and co-host, Rowan Wood. Rowan, thank you so much for coming on.
Of course, you can always count on me.
And who has the better film reference t-shirt today? Everybody who sees me today is going to get Shrek'd. Uh, so there we go. But Rowan, so thank you for joining me. And for those listening who haven't tuned into the show before, we have three segments. We have coming attractions, we have our feature film, The Whole Town's Talking, and our recommendations, or maybe one that's not so recommended that Rowan needs to get something off of his chest. But we're in a very special time for coming attractions. It is December 22nd. It is Christmas time, and there are movies galore, movies
Mhm.
everywhere. And just to list off the insane amount of movies that are coming out on this day, Anyone But You, Aquaman the Lost Kingdom, Migration, Poor Things Expands, All of Us Strangers, Freud's Last Session, The Iron Claw, Memory, Rebel Moon Part 1 on Netflix, and Society of the Snow. But Rowan, what are you most looking forward to checking out?
Okay. So this is not necessarily the movie I'm most excited to check out. It is the
Okay.
movie I am most interested in on a very base level. Um, I'm accepting Poor Things from this because like it's the wide release, so it's not,
Yeah.
film, all that. Wide releases suck. Just release your movie. I
I'm writing a
am
whole article about that.
Yes. I am most interested in Anyone But You, which is the rom-com that's stars Sydney Sweeney and Glenn Powell.
Yeah.
This has been a controversial movie for a while, just because um just because of the initial quote unquote chemistry between the two leads. There were there were rumors while they were filming that there was a real romance going on. I personally I never really care about this like celebrity gossip, but I do think it's fun when two people are, not to say that these two are the greatest actors in the world, but when their acting is good enough that they can sell chemistry like this. Um, I do think it is interesting how well or how interestingly the public tends to react. But anyway, this is sort of based on Much Ado About Nothing. It's a
Okay.
Shakespearean, takeoff, um, in which Sydney Sweeney and Glenn Powell, they have to pretend to be they pretend to be together for like a wedding or something in Australia. I don't know. The plot doesn't matter, but I think the buzz around this movie is the funniest part of it, because I personally I think this is going to be a very lackluster this movie is not going to be
They're not
that
screening it.
exactly,
They
that is a
are
terrible
actively
sign.
not screening it.
So I think there is definitely no indication that it is going to be a great movie or like even good, but I do want to see. I am interested to see it just to see is their chemistry as good as people are saying it is? Because I watched the trailer and it is a horrendous trailer. I like the trailer did not make me want to see the movie at all. It didn't it actually kind of made my interest recoil a little bit. Um, but just on the very basic elements appeal to my instincts as a human to want to know the hot goss. And if the hot goss is this movie or what happens in this movie, I am very interested. So I will be seeing this movie. I don't know when. I'm not gonna be rushing to the theaters
I
to
might
watch
see
it.
this
But
Thursday night, honestly,
nice,
just to get it
yeah.
out of the way.
I have a high school like an alumni event on Friday, which is when this episode's coming out. And so I may or may not just gather some friends from that and head to the movie theater right down the road after that to get it out of the way.
Yeah, I'm gonna be seeing Poor Things, so much better use of my
Yeah,
time,
totally.
probably.
Yeah.
And then what's the other film that you want to mention, Rowan?
So I saw All of Us Strangers at the New York Film Festival this year, and I have been an active proponent of it ever since. I think everyone needs to see this movie. It is emotional. Uh, it is so incredibly nuanced, and it
Mhm.
has some of the best performances of like at least of the year.
Yeah.
Andrew Scott, Paul Mescal, Claire Foy, Jamie Bell, everyone, all of the four central performances are dynamic. I desperately hope that they get awards attention. I don't know if they will. I
They're
don't
gonna
even know
get
if this movie,
masked.
yeah, I don't even know if this movie is going to get any attention.
It's gonna
But
get masked.
ugh, I wish it didn't. I wish more people were paying attention.
Where literally
Uh,
four other actors who are absolutely incredible just got completely ignored by every awards.
yeah. So I think this is yeah, I really hope this movie gets the attention it deserves. So if this movie's playing near you, please go see it. It is really, really, really fantastic.
I second that emotion because I did see this earlier, and it's a haunting and beautiful and impactful and mysterious film. Like it's something that's very unexpected. It's not the kind of film that you would expect it to play out the way that it does, but it's
Mhm.
such an interesting experience. My most anticipated, which I did technically see this, but like I was so excited about this movie, is the Iron Claw. As a pro wrestling fan and somebody who knows the story of the Von Erich family, I'm warning all of you. This is a tragic movie. Don't go thinking that this is just some kind of wrestling movie. This is from A24. You should know better. But like just seeing how they capture like the pro wrestling, Zac Efron, Holt McElhenney, and just this whole cast looks incredible. And I was so excited to check this out just from the fact that like one, it's a pro wrestling movie, and two, it's an A24 film. So you know there's gonna be something special about it. And there
Mhm.
is. And I knew what was going to happen, and I was still emotionally devastated. So says a lot. Also has Jeremy Allen White from The Bear in it too.
Mhm.
So hot.
I'm very excited to see this.
But yeah, so there's a lot of things to go check out this weekend. So drag your family, go watch a bunch of movies.
Yeah.
But getting into our feature film, we're in 1935 now for my journey through John Ford, and the whole town's talking. And this, to give a little background, this film is indeed a comedy. We have Edward G. Robinson, one of the most famous actors of the time, popping up in here. Jean Arthur. This is based on a W.R. Burnett story. Has footage. They actually used footage from another film, The Criminal Code, to put
Did they
into this
really?
movie, which is interesting. Robinson wanted to play someone other than a gangster. So one of those main reasons why he wanted to join this film. And they actually had to borrow him from Warner Brothers to actually make this movie happen.
That's
Because that
very
was a
interesting.
fun time back then when studios owned people, more or less. So but this is basically the story is we have Edward G. Robinson playing this guy, and he's mistaken for a gangster. And then he winds up getting caught up with this gangster while he's still trying to woo Jean Arthur's character, who's a fast talking lady, in this 1935 film. But Rowan, what are your general thoughts?
I thought this movie was so fun.
Mhm.
I have been disappointed so far with the John Ford movies that
Uh,
that I have picked, and of course that's no one's fault. But this movie was a maybe it's just the fact that I haven't had like been able to talk about a lot of really good ones on this show, but I thought this movie was so fantastic. It's such a
mhm,
simple setup, um, and at the same time, like has some really, really funny moments. Even though the humor is pretty understated,
mhm.
it prioritizes the drama and weans the humor from and gleans the humor from the situation rather than like actual like trying to be outwardly funny, which
Yeah.
I think is a really, really good way to do it and one that John Ford clearly and a lesson that John Ford clearly learned after misfires like Dr. Bull, which we talked about the last time I was on
Yep.
the show. Um, it's a very, classic mistaken identity story. But what you think happens in this movie is really only the first half hour. And
Mhm.
that's when, like, afterward, the movie gets really, really good. The performances, the dialogue, everything's so good. It is a movie that could never be made today for a variety of reasons. Just like so many mistaken identity stories from this time period are, their very feasibility has been erased by the invention of modern technology.
Cell
Um,
phones.
yeah. But I do think it's fun that this movie was made when it did because we do get movies like this and we do get stories like this that can't be solved in the way that they would be solved today, and I love that.
Mhm. Yeah, it's definitely feels like this was an early, fresh take on like the missing identity or mistaken identity trope because you've seen that so many times before, and that's always interesting about talking about these older films. It's like, was this one of the ones that set the tropes and
Mhm.
really put that forward? And I loved Edward G. Robinson in this because, like, one, he is playing the gangster who's like, yeah, I'm a bad guy, and he's like really playing that up. And then he's so nervous and timid and everything as the main character. It's
Yeah.
so interesting seeing him play that. And because, like, Edward G. Robinson just has that scally kind of look to him, and he just seems so sad. A
Mhm.
lot of this movie, he's just like, I'm not this man, leave me alone. And you have this whole entire dynamic. And Jean Arthur was so much fun in this. She, like, I thought she was in uh His Girl Friday. Felt like how zippy the dialogue was and everything, and like she's that fast talking, sharp female character from movies at this time.
Yeah.
And yeah, they really utilize the mistaken identity in a couple different ways. Like the whole entire arrest at the beginning of the film was crazy. They'll just run into this restaurant, they'll like point guns at them, just like, you're
Yeah.
under arrest. I'm just like, this is ridiculous. And then it's really cool seeing the scenes where you have two Edward G. Robinsons in them for like an early
Right?
film. It looks so
Yeah.
good. I was
Hmm.
really impressed by just like the technical achievement of that. Uh and like the
Yeah.
whole entire thing with like the whole prison situation was crazy. And then just the whole where it gets to at the end, this whole scheme of like there was this really, really tense moment at a bank, like building that tension of like, is he gonna walk into the bank? Are they gonna shoot him? And
Hmm.
us knowing that it's not the gangster, and everybody else not knowing that, and there's this really good cross cutting between shots that kept building up that tension, and then it goes wild how this all plays out. Just like, oh my god,
Yeah.
and they really play up the mistaken identity elements to great effect in this film. And yeah, there's definitely some really funny moments, some good sharp dialogue. There's like a little couple of things. Like there's one sequence where our main character gets overwhelmed, and then it's like it kind of feels like you're in a haze, you're in a fever dream. There's these flashing lights and these hard close-ups and everything. So you could definitely tell there was moments where John Ford was kind of flexing his filmmaking skills.
Hmm.
Whereas I think some of the movies, especially we watched, where it was just like anybody could have made this. And
Right.
it felt kind of disappointing in that way. But yeah, also Edward G. Robinson just absolutely killed it playing both of these roles in this film. I could definitely tell why he wanted to do something different, and it definitely showed.
Hmm. Yeah, totally. I mean, I had never seen him in anything else, so I totally bought him initially as this like everyday guy, like this schmuck.
Yeah.
Um, but I do agree. It's like the filmmaking itself is not the highlight, but it's still revolutionary. Like it's still like secretly revolutionary as a work of film. Um, yeah, like the hammy acting is so fun, like very of its time, and
Yeah.
also it takes itself seriously enough that you buy everything that's happening as a real occurrence, but it's taken, but it's done with enough levity that like clearly, like this is a comedy. It's supposed to be goofy. So
Mhm.
it's so the, like there's no mistaking the tone for something else. The love story that's supposed to be central felt more like an afterthought to me. Like the main allure of this movie for me was the mistaken identity,
Mhm.
was the humor and the situations that excuse me come from that. But it's cute, especially at the end. I like the ending, which
Yeah.
it's like a very clean, tying it up. wrap up. But yeah, no, I really really like this movie, and I'm glad I saw it.
Yeah, throw some kudos to Edward G. Robinson for his drunk acting.
Exactly.
That
Yeah.
was a fun part
He's
of the
just
movie.
really really fantastic.
Yeah. Because like I've seen some of his like gangster movie performances, but I've also seen him in Double Indemnity. I've seen
Mhm.
him, he was in Ten Commandments. He's the one who winds up encouraging everybody to worship the golden bull
Mm,
towards the end of like the Ten Commandments. And it's just like bad on you. But it's one of those kinds of things where it's just like every film I feel like at this time needed to have some kind of love story.
yeah.
I don't know why. I don't know why people feel that way today. Not every movie needs to have a love
Yeah,
story.
I
But
know.
like I feel like Jean Arthur was charismatic enough to be like, I could see why he likes her.
Right.
I don't know why she likes him per
Yeah.
se. He's a nice guy. There's also I think that was used for a really good and uncomfortable mistaken identity scene where like she goes to see our protagonist, but it's the gangster,
Right.
and he's a little more aggressive, like aggressive enough where she's like, oh, a little bit excited, and then you see the boundaries being pushed, and you're just like,
Right.
oh,
Yeah.
this is uncomfortable, and you can see her being uncomfortable. So I think definitely the biggest thing was them being able to leverage that concept, and they really worked it and got a whole lot of great moments and pretty explosive moments towards the end,
Yeah.
if I say so.
Yeah.
Yeah, so this is definitely one of my favorite of the John Ford movies that I've watched so far.
Mhm.
So, like top three.
Yeah.
There's two that I've watched so far that were like great films, and I think both of them were nominated for Best Picture.
Mm,
But
makes
like
sense.
at this point, this one was just so much fun, competently made and well acted. Just a
Mhm.
really fun time. And it's enjoyable seeing some of these other ones before, in a couple of months I'm gonna get to Stagecoach and Young Mr. Lincoln and Grapes of Wrath and stuff like that. And that's like these movies that John Ford had made in his career. But
Yeah.
let's get some recommendations. So, Ron, what do you want to recommend to everyone?
So I have a movie called Close Up from 1990. It is based on a true story. And what is the most interesting element of this movie, I think, is that it is it is not filmed in the documentary style. It's from 1990. Um, but it is documentary in a very interesting way, in that it is filmed as a fiction, as a piece of fiction, using every single person from the real case playing themselves. Which you would think, oh no, it's an 11-17 to Paris situation. They're all going to be terrible at acting. No, you would not be able to tell that these are the real people if you didn't look that up beforehand, which is even more impressive. So it's based on a case where this young man impersonated this Persian filmmaker that like nobody really knows what he looks like. And so this family, once they start to get suspicious, they assume that he's trying to rob them because he told them that he wants to film something in their house. And so he gets arrested, and then he goes to trial, and we see flashes of during the trial of like the events unfolding as he talks about them. And in the end, it does turn out that this movie is about cinema and what cinema means to each individual person, and how we can use cinema to examine real life. And while this movie is doing exactly that thing with the cast and the people who were actually involved in the real thing, it is truly, truly astonishing, and a really, really fantastic piece of art. And it's only 90 minutes. And so there is something to be said for that as well. Yeah,
That sounds fascinating.
it's really, really interesting. I think you specifically, Shane, would really, really enjoy it.
Adding it to the endless watch list. Oh, it is already on this endless watch
Of
list.
course it is. Makes sense.
So I will get to it eventually. And then,
Yeah.
Rowan, special, what do you want to tell people to avoid?
So I have another podcast called Runtime Babe. We have been we've been like revisiting franchises from our childhood and basically seeing if they hold up in the way that in a different way than they did when we were younger. And so we just watched through the Night at the Museum franchise, which was a staple of my childhood. I loved those movies, and I still do. Um, and most people don't know that there is a fourth Night at the Museum film, divorced from the original trilogy, that was released on Disney Plus in 2022. It is called Night at the Museum: Kamen-Ra Rises Again. It is 2D animated, and it is terrible. It's so bad. Has no sense of story, of like cohesive story, no sense of character, no respect for any of the other movies and their continuities. And just while watching it, you will ask yourself time and time again, why does this movie exist? It makes absolutely no sense.
It
Um,
shouldn't.
it
It
shouldn't
shouldn't
it shouldn't
exist.
exist. Yeah. Um, but anyway, so I am here to tell you to stay away from that movie, especially if you love the Night at the Museum movies. Don't watch it. Your experience with them will be ruined.
I watched it and I do have a really good soft spot for Night at the Museum. I watched the first one so many times and
Mhm.
it just rips all the charm out of it and just
Totally.
feels like the prototypical of like, hey, we have this property. Let's throw some schlock on Disney Plus. People will watch it.
Exactly.
They'll see the name, they'll watch it, and then they'll all be disappointed because it was disappointing.
Mhm.
So, my recommendation, so new film that I wanted to recommend is The Boy and the Heron because Miyazaki still got it. So good. This movie's weird though.
Oh yeah.
It's Miyazaki's The Birds, where parakeets have meat cleavers and stuff. And want to mess some people's days up. It's a beautiful film. It's so beautiful. That's kind of redundant saying any Miyazaki film's beautiful, but it's beautiful. And I really love what they did in terms of the story of this young boy and the trauma that he's going through and what he's trying to process through. And then the fantasy world that they create is absolutely imaginative and crazy and gorgeous. And I saw when I went to my press screening, it was the actual subbed Japanese voice performers.
As
So
it should be.
thing is, I haven't gotten a chance to do like hear the whole Robert Pattinson and
Me
everybody
neither.
else doing their thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, the Heron does have a really like creepy, gravelly, weird voice. And I'm
Mhm.
like, well, Robert Pattinson just replicated that, didn't he? So it worked, it fit. So good. It's way towards the top of my films this year. I'm probably in I think the minority that I would love to see this win best animated feature because I feel like Across the Spider-Verse is probably going to be like the front runner for it. And then the Academy will all let us down when they give it to Super Mario
Oh no, please, God, no.
don't put that into the universe. Off my watch list, the last couple of movies I watched off my watch list weren't great.
Mhm.
But for my monthly podcast for the Cinematic Wasteland, I watched a bunch of films from 1911, and one of them that I thought was really cool. Actually, the top three films that I watched were all from Italy, but this was The Fall of Troy, and this had some really impressive battle scenes for a film that was made in 1911.
Uh-huh.
And like they had some big scale stuff. Like they had these giant walls with extras on the bottom fighting, people throwing stuff from the top of the walls and everything. I'm like, this is a pretty big scale battle for a film that's
Yeah.
like 20 minutes.
Mhm.
Actually, I think 30 minutes and also made in 1911. So there were some
Mhm.
really cool things to take
Right.
out of it. And it was a pretty faithful adaptation of like the Iliad, like
Cool.
the legend of the Battle of Troy. And then my last one is because I absolutely love this movie to pieces is Song of the Sea because I love everything Cartoon Saloon has made generally and all of their Gaelic centric films about like I just got this beautiful Irish folklore trilogy box set of theirs that
Mhm.
had wolfwalkers in it on
Nice.
Blu-ray. And Song of the Sea is so beautiful in terms of like its story about this young girl and her brother who go on this fantastical adventure trying to get her back to where she needs to be in the ocean. Um, it's so beautifully animated. I really put it up there like Studio Ghibli and Cartoon Saloon are like peak fantasy creators, and they just make things so absolutely gorgeous.
Mhm.
And if you haven't seen any of like The Secret of Kells, Song of the Sea, and Wolf Walkers, check them out. But those are my recommendations, and that's our show. So, Rowan, thank you so much for coming on and talking some more John Ford.
Of course, always.
And thank all of you out there for always tuning in and supporting your Wasteland Reviewer.